And I start crying with joy. Thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you for not abandoning me. And at the same time, I felt this electrical shock go through my body.
Mhm.
I felt like I had been struck by the proverbial lightning bolt of God. But the strange thing was that there was no.
This is Dale Cross, and welcome to another edition of the Soul Inspire podcast. This is the audio video podcast that features spiritually uplifting stories from awakening souls to help inspire you on your own soul journey. On this episode, my guest is Mary Grace. She is a parapsychologist, spiritual teacher, and founder of Gifts of Grace Ministries and the Finger Lakes UFO and Paranormal Meetup. She provides counseling and education on paranormal, supernatural, mystical, and near-death experiences and phenomena. She also authored the groundbreaking book, Talking to God and Grandma, Mystics, Mediums, and the Communion of Saints. Mary Grace, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Dale. Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to share my passion for the paranormal.
Oh, the pleasure is
Honored to
all.
be here.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to getting into this with you. Why don't we start with a little bit about your spiritual background?
Well, I was born and raised Catholic, Roman Catholic, small church. I live in a very rural area, small town, one small Catholic church where everybody knows everyone else. And that's kind of it for my religion. That's, there was nothing else to discuss. That was it.
Hi, this is Dale Cross of Soul Inspire TV, and I want to invite you to my free webinar, Activate Your 5D Heart in the 3D. Are you ready to discover how to bring heaven down to earth and live in a bliss-filled reality of joy in the midst of collective chaos? Learn how to effectively shift from a 3D mind-based reality of struggling, striving, battle between light and dark. Learn how to shift from that to a 5D heart-based reality of effortlessness, joy, and unconditional love. This webinar will literally transform your life because I'm going to help you to learn how to live in alignment with your true nature of joy. And that's what's going to get you through all the chaos. So go ahead, click on the link in the description below this video, head on over to dalecross.net and click on the free webinar, Activate Your 5D Heart in the 3D. I'm looking forward to seeing you. Peace and blessings to you.
It
Okay.
was my religion.
Yeah.
And until I had my experience, that was my whole life.
Okay. So how did you get into all the mystical stuff? It doesn't sound like it was triggered by the Catholic experience.
No, anything but. Well, it started with my near-death experience. And want me to get into it? We'll just start.
Absolutely. I'm
Okay.
fascinated by those. I've had lots of guests about those, but they're always can always learn something new and they're always fascinating. So let's hear
Always
yours.
unique, yes.
Yes.
Um, well, my story starts when I hit bottom in life. And I'm sure most people know what that's like when you hit bottom in life. And what was going on for me at the time is that I was extremely sick with two incurable illnesses, uh, epilepsy and lupus.
Mm.
And the side effects of my epilepsy caused me to have about 5 seizures a day. And the effects of my lupus um, led to 5 surgeries and a hole in my heart as my body was slowly killing itself from an overactive immune system,
Wow.
which is what lupus is, an autoimmune disease.
Hmm.
So at the time, I had 5 medical doctors I saw at the time, and was on 24 different medications.
Mm.
I was kind of living in limbo. Physically, I was alive, but I wasn't living. And I was dying, but I wasn't dead. And to top it all off, from the age of 14, I had been addicted to drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was my physical state. Mentally, I was grieving the loss of my mother. I was grieving the loss of my health and social life.
Mm-hmm.
And to top it all off, to cope with it all, I should say, I just did more drugs and more alcohol.
Right.
And that was kind of my life. And
Mm-hmm.
didn't have much of a social life. So one day I had enough. I just, that was it. I had enough. I knew I had to do something. I didn't know what at first. So what I did was I decided to drive to the cemetery to be near my mom. And it was November 1st. It was a cold, chilly November night, and I got on my knees on my mother's grave and I prayed to God to take me home.
Mm-hmm.
I no longer wanted to be a part of this cold, cruel world and did not want to be here at all. And I got very angry at God. I got mad. I was like, why me, God? Why me? Why have you abandoned me? And why have you left me in this state of limbo? And I'm hollering, I'm yelling at God, shit or get off the pot, God. You either heal me or take me home. Just make up your mind. Have you no compassion? Have you no mercy? Just why me? Why have I been cursed with these illnesses? And why am I here? I just don't want to be here anymore. And then I moved to making a deal with God. I'm sure most of you have made a deal with God at some point in your life.
Right.
So I said, give me a sign that you haven't abandoned me. And I didn't know what at first. I thought, I know, I'll quit drinking. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll quit drinking.
Right.
But if I don't get a sign, God, then screw you. I'll just drink myself to death. Only I didn't say screw. I kind of used the F bomb there. And I
Right.
still can't believe I said that to God, but I guess it got his attention.
Oh, well, God's not offended by swear words. No problem.
So, I was in the cemetery and I was just, pouring my heart out to God. I'm sobbing, I'm crying. And what seemed like hours of just talking to myself, I admitted defeat and I went home, just emotionally, spiritually, mentally bankrupt.
Mm.
And it was the next day I got my sign from God. I had what is known as a near-death experience. And I'm going to tell you the events that led up to that. So the next day, I decided I was going to drive to the city. And for me, it was the city of Rochester, New York. I live about 45 miles south of there on the Finger Lakes. I was going to go into the city because I wanted to get the latest book from John Edward. It was One Last Time. And while I was in there, I was going to get some more drugs and alcohol. So I got up in the morning and I popped a couple of ephedrine pills for energy because I was always so tired. I lived on basically amphetamines, and the time you could get ephedrine at the 7-Eleven. Now it's banned. But so I popped some pills. I drive to the city and I drove to a place where I bought a bag of cocaine. And I took that bag of cocaine and I put it in the console of my car. And then I drove to a nearby liquor store. I bought a bottle of whiskey and I put it under the front seat of my car. And then I hopped on this expressway called 390 that goes around Rochester and goes headed to Henrietta, to where the Borders bookstore was. And it was while I was driving on 390 that I got my sign from God.
Hmm.
Now, many people know what it's like to hear a song, maybe on the radio or at church, when the words to that song is the message that you needed at that precise moment in your life, the exact words. Well, I was listening to the radio, and the song that came pouring out of my radio was one that I knew very well. It was from the 80s rock group, The Styx,
Mm-hmm.
but I hadn't heard it in probably 20 years. And the words that came pouring out of the radio that spoke to my broken soul were this: hard times come and hard times go, and in between you hope and pray the scars don't show. Life is strange, but so unsure. In days you hardly make it through, you swear that there's a curse on you, and nothing seems to fit. Things don't go your way. You know you've had enough. You've had the right to say, why me? Why me? The name of the song was Why Me? And the words summed up everything that I had been going through in the cemetery the
Mm-hmm.
night before. And as I heard these words, I just knew that was my sign from God. And I started crying with joy. Thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you for not abandoning me. And at the same time, I felt this electrical shock go through my body.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I had been struck by the proverbial lightning bolt of God. But the strange thing was that there was no pain. It was only later on, months later, that I learned what was more than likely occurring at that exact moment was cardiac arrest.
Mm.
But I didn't know it at the time, and I was so happy. I'm driving the car, I'm crying. Thank you, God. Thank you for giving me this sign. I was so happy. And I was right near the exit I needed to be for the bookstore. So I managed to drive the car um, safely off the exit, drove right into the bookstore was right there.
Mm-hmm.
I pulled into the parking lot. I happened to park the car, and I happened to look at the clock. And for some reason, it was 5:15 p.m. I shut the car off. I put my head back on the headrest. I'm still crying. Thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you for not abandoning me. I was just so happy. And as my head's back on the headrest, the next thing I know, I'm floating up, up, up into the most brilliant, most beautiful white light. And when I reached that site, I was immersed in this tremendous amount of love that permeated every cell of my body. And this was a force of love that was nothing like I had experienced on earth. It was a million times more intense. And this light just surrounded me and became me as we merged into one. And when I was in this light, I was not concerned about any earthly cares. All the pain in my body had gone, and I was free. And a peace and tranquility settled within me. I just knew that I was there to just rest and heal, and was being conveyed to me that everything was going to be all right. Everything was going to be all right. And I just relaxed, and I totally surrendered to that light and
Mm-hmm.
that love. And when I was in that space, I recognized where I was. And I recognized this being of light. I was with my Creator in heaven. And I was home. And this being of light made me feel like I was the most precious thing in the universe, that I was loved more than anything else. And this love would never be separated from me. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. There was no conditions. And condemnation and punishment, they were just concepts that did not and could not exist in this all-encompassing light. Any sins that I had committed were already forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
And my earthly life back on earth was just a distant dream. And then what happened, I moved into a kind of what's known as a life review. And I'm not going to get all the details of that, but just the important thing is to know that I was shown scenes from my life. And some of them were when people had hurt me or were mean to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood that those people were here to help me on my spiritual progression. And all the suffering and sanity of my life, it had purpose and it all made sense. And then after the life review, I was back in the light. And the light God communicated to me without any spoken words. I have done all that you asked of me. I gave you a sign that I haven't abandoned you, and I brought you back home. You cannot stay, however. Your work is not yet finished.
Okay.
Now, in response, I was okay with that decision. I knew it was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing that I wouldn't do or promise to somebody that loved me that much. And with that thought, I felt myself being pulled backwards from the light.
Okay.
I was being pulled backwards. And the next thing I knew, I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of Borders bookstore. And the first thing I noticed was that I was in a state of euphoria that was a million times better than any high I had ever got from any earthly drugs.
Okay.
I felt fantastic, like I could conquer the world. And then I checked my clock, and I noticed it was 6 o'clock. 45 minutes had passed since I parked the car. And ironically, I said out loud, "What the hell just happened?"
Mm-hmm.
Well, evidently heaven had just happened to me.
Yeah, that's right.
I was like, I'm just sitting in my car trying to process everything that happened to me. And then I just started coming back to reality. And then I remembered a promise that I made the night before to God. And I reached in the console of my car and I took out the bag of cocaine, and I reached under the front seat and I took out the bottle of whiskey, and I'm looking at him like this, and I'm like, this is not gonna be easy.
Mm-hmm.
But a promise is a promise. But at the same time, all of a sudden, these things meant nothing to me. They
Oh.
were like penny candy. I'm like, the high that I was on from being in the light was so much better.
Yeah.
Those things just didn't mean anything to me anymore.
Okay.
And then as I'm sitting there, I thought, I checked myself over. I'm like, I guess I'm okay. I might as well go in to the bookstore to get the book I came for.
Mhm.
So I open the car door and I step into the parking lot. And it didn't take me long to realize that the world I stepped into was not the one I left 45 minutes earlier, because
Mhm.
everything had changed.
Wow.
Now, one of the first things, do we have any questions up until now? Because I'm just going to talk about the after effects.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, you can talk about the after effects and then I'll ask the questions.
Okay. So the first thing I noticed is I walked across the parking lot. I felt like I was floating. It's like I wasn't walking, I was floating. And I went into the bookstore and I'm looking around at all the other customers, and everything was weird and wonderful. But the thing I noticed is that as I looked at another customer, I had this overwhelming sense of love for them. And I just wanted to run up and hug everyone and tell
Mhm.
them, don't you know how much God loves you and
Right.
everything's going to be all right? And now, fortunately, I restrained myself from doing that. So
Yeah.
I got the book and I got out of there. And it was only with time that I realized how much my life had changed the day I saw the light. Now, I do like to focus on the after effects of the near-death experience. I don't think people do that enough, because
Okay.
this is a life-changing event. And to this day, over 20 years later, it's just can be a struggle. It can be a struggle.
Mhm.
So, like I said, one of the first things I noticed was that my heart overflowed with this love for everything.
Mhm.
And if I saw like a homeless person on the street, I love that person as much as I love my own husband.
Mhm.
I love the birds and the trees and nature as much as I love my own family and friends.
Mhm.
I love so much, it physically hurt. Is I
Wow.
had this constant pain in my chest,
Mhm.
and I could feel this presence. I thought my heart was going to explode. And I just kept thinking about the movie, the first Alien movie, where the creature just pops out of the guy's chest, and I, this is gonna, this is gonna happen to me. Something's just gonna explode. I don't know, but something's gotta happen.
Right.
And it, I found out just very quickly that the human body was not meant to take such a force. It just wasn't. Because
Mhm.
I had this living presence in me that felt like an alien.
Yeah.
And then I knew that the next thing that happened is, like, as days went by, I started getting more energy, and I like to walk through the woods and fields to the nearby lake, Hemlock Lake. And just everything I looked at, I noticed that God was in everything, and there was nothing that was not of God. For example, if I just focused on a flower, I just look at the flower
Mm.
and I could feel God's presence, and it would just bring tears of joy to my eyes. Or
Mhm.
to see a butterfly warming its wings on a flower, it would just, I could feel and sense God in that butterfly. And when I was walking outside, like in the rain, the first time it rained, when I was outside and the rain would land on my arm, and every drop, I could feel God's presence in the drops of rain.
Hmm.
And started calling, whenever it rained, I called it liquid love because I could feel their presence. And then I had, from what I learned from my research, is known as a unitive experience, where I felt connected to everything. I was at one with everything in the world. And because of this, I could never harm anything. It's like, and even if I see an ant, it's like I could never hurt an ant because I know that I am one with that ant. And
Right.
that ant has a purpose and meaning in life, and that God loves that creature, that insect, just as much as he loves me.
Right.
So that was another thing that was just very hard to, deal with. And merging, another thing that I found out that it's actually kind of cool, is I found out that whatever I focused on, I could merge with. So I was taking my walks like to the lake, and I would be at the lake, and I saw like the eagle flying overhead, and I focused on the eagle. I could feel what it was like to soar on the breeze and maybe catch a thermal. Or if I focused my attention on the geese that were floating on the lake,
Yeah.
I could feel what it was like to kind of bob up and down on the waves along with the geese. And I just found all these new ways to experience God in this whole new world that opened up to me. One of the things I like to do is in the fields that you've probably seen those milkweed pods, these big green pods, and you can rip them open and there's white seeds in there. And I would do that, and I would just scatter the seeds to the wind, and then I could merge with them and feel what it was like to kind of just float on the wind. And another thing that I found that it was really kind of fun to do is that I could merge with a snowflake in the wintertime. I could merge with a snowflake and feel what it was like to gently fall from the sky in a sense of peace and joy. Well, who knew that snowflakes were joyful? But they
Right.
really are joyful.
Right.
So I just spent all my time, hours and hours every day, just being different things, merging with different things. And then, of course, my relationship with God just became intense. I felt like I was not only obsessed, but possessed by God. And my whole life, it overturned my whole life. And then one day I had this epiphany. Well, if God is in me, he must be in everybody else too.
Yeah.
They didn't teach me this in religious education.
No.
They taught me that God was separate from me. He
Yeah.
was in heaven, and the
Yeah.
only way for me to be with him was to obey all the church rules.
Right.
Well, now my religion is not making sense to me anymore. And not only that, my psychic abilities just exploded. Now I found out that I can communicate with the spirit world or the animals or the trees, whatever I wanted to. And, I met my guardian angels and guides, and I would communicate with them. And I'd spend all my time talking with the birds and the animals and nature and people on the other side. And of course, I kept in touch with my mother, communicate with her. And so that was a whole other thing. It was just having all this information from the other side coming into my head and not really knowing how to control things. But the other thing I noticed, physically, there was things going on with my body. Like I said, I started before the day I saw the light. It was a struggle to get out of bed. And here now I'm walking 2 miles a day, walking my dogs to the nearby lake, and just had all this energy. And I hardly needed to eat at all because I just felt like I was on amphetamines all the time. I had all this energy, and at the same time, the day after my NDE, I immediately stopped having seizures.
Hmm.
And I decided that I wanted to know what happened to me that day. So I went to all 5 of my doctors to get checked out completely. I had new EEGs done of my brain waves. I had a new EKG done on my heart. I had anti-nuclear antibody tests done for lupus. And I had an ultrasound on my heart. And the doctors were surprised that all my tests came back negative, and even the hole in my heart was gone.
Amazing.
So it was, truly a miracle, and I felt great. And then within a couple months, I I ended up tapering off all 24 medications that I was on. So for the first time in many years, I was medication and disease free. And then in addition, I had kept my bargain with God, and I was free of alcohol and drug addiction. And,
Phenomenal.
but on the downside, on the downside,
Okay, now the downside.
integration into this world is a lengthy and
Uh-huh.
difficult, lonely process.
Right.
Often said, if I had 3 feet, 2 would have been on the other side, and one would have been in this world, because my heart and my life was back on the other side, and my home was with God, and I had terrible bouts of homesickness.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
so some of the things, I mean, I was always in a state, as long as I was in nature with God or meditating or prayer, I was fine. I was in a state of bliss. But when I had to play the role of wife, aunt, mother to my dogs and cats, mental health professional, not so important to me. No, not anymore. Things like cleaning the house, doing the laundry, paying bills, that just didn't matter to me anymore. My time was better spent with God,
Right.
much to the chagrin of my husband. So it was just one of those side effects. And the other strange thing is that eating became torture to me,
Oh.
because it's hard to eat something that you feel at one with. For example, I would look at a hamburger, and all I could see were the big brown eyes of a cow.
Hmm.
How could I possibly eat a hamburger? I'm one with it. So I quickly decided I would just quit eating meat, because that would just eliminate a whole food group that I wouldn't have to feel guilty about. But at the same time, I was still keenly aware, just to eat a piece of bread, that there was a stalk of wheat that gave its life for that piece of bread.
Yeah.
And I was aware that I didn't like the fact that something had to die in order for me to live.
Hmm.
And I would have gladly traded my life for that stalk of wheat that became my bread, because then I would be on the other side with God. So I actually became jealous of my food.
Oh, because it gets to be on the other side. Yeah, when it's killed, it gets to go back into.
So these are just the strange things,
Interesting. Yeah.
processes that you go through when you're at one with everything.
Okay.
And
That would help for you, yeah.
so, eventually I was becoming a
Mhm.
basket case, and I knew I needed help. But because I felt like an alien here. I was in this world, and I was not of it. This was not my home. Nope, I'm just biding my time until I cross over. So, but I didn't know who to go to for help. Now, I could have gone to a colleague, a fellow psychologist, where I worked, mental health field. I thought, well, that person would probably suggest some medication, maybe 30 days in psychiatric ward. This isn't a medical issue. This is a God issue. Who would I go to about a God issue? Well, I went to the one person who I thought would understand and would be able to help me. I went to my Catholic priest. Now, you have to understand, for me, just to even make an appointment to see my priest, I've never done that in my entire life. The priests were like gods, and they were kind of scary. But I was desperate. So I made an appointment and to go see the priest. And I'd never even been in the rectory before. But I did it. And I sat down and he listened very patiently to me. I told him my whole story, what had happened to me, how I learned to communicate with Mom. And he knew my mother very well. She attended Mass every Sunday. And he was there for her funeral, buried her. And when I was all through talking to him, he became very stern. Don't you know that what you're doing is dabbling with the devil?
Ooh.
Don't you know that communicating with your mother is against the teachings of the church? And obviously, these experiences that you think you had, they're probably hallucinations that were brought on from the drugs that you're doing. You need psychiatric help. And furthermore, you need to find another church. Well, I left there and I went home and I just sobbed to my husband. I was devastated. I couldn't understand. It was like, if God could love me and accept me, why couldn't my own religion?
Right.
So then I got mad and I thought, well, who was you to tell me I had to find another church? I had been going there for 40 years. I was baptized there, my first communion. I got married there, all my sacraments, except for death. And he'd only been there a couple of years because they, you know how they move these priests around. So I thought, this is my church. Who's he to tell me I can't go to church there? So the next Sunday, I went to Mass. The next day, a sheriff showed up at my front door and said, by orders of this priest, you are not to set foot on church property ever again. And if you do, you will be arrested for trespassing. I couldn't believe it. Like I said, I didn't understand it. If God could love and accept me, why couldn't my own religion? Why couldn't my own church? And I had this, and I felt there was an injustice had been done. And I had this burning question. If we can talk to God and the saints in heaven, why can't we talk to Grandma or Uncle Joe or my mother? What's up with that? So I spent the next 10 years researching and writing a book on how Catholics can communicate and stay connected to loved ones on the other side through the church doctrine on the communion of saints. Because most people think of saints as being the canonized people, like, you know, Saint Mary or Saint Anthony, I pray to whenever I lose something.
Yeah.
But I found out through my research, it's saints according to the church doctrine. Just the church is made up of people that live on 3 different states, what they call states or existence, which is earth, purgatory, and heaven. That's the church. And we can ask for favors and pray to those in heaven, or we can pray for people here on earth. Like if someone's sick, we can pray for them. So So we have this church doctrine, and we have the Apostles' Creed that says, I believe in the communion of saints. So I thought, well, if we're going to believe in the communion of saints, doesn't it follow that you would practice communion or communication with our fellow believers in heaven? And if so, where was the instruction manual and how do we do this? Well, there wasn't one, so I wrote it. Did all those years of research, writing that. And yeah, that became my mission. And then I wanted to help other people because I wanted to help other people that were having experiences, whether they're near-death experiences, or mediumistic experiences. I wanted to help people. I didn't think people should have to choose between their religion and their spiritual gifts or their psychic abilities. So I started my own counseling service to help people with that. Yeah, so that's about it for, if you have any questions.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all
Such
right,
a
we'll get into it.
all right, such a fascinating story, but I wanted you to sort of lay it all out first. So you said that you had what's called a life review, and I've heard of these countless times with other guests. I'd like to know, it seems to me that even though you were showing some of the positive and maybe more negative things that you had done, did you feel any sense of judgment from any external deity with your life review? Or did you feel it was just all good, all God, all one, and everything worked together
It
in
was
some
just
way?
a more of a total comprehension as to why everything happened. And
Okay.
I understood everything, and it wasn't judgmental at all. There
Hmm.
was no judgment on my
Mm.
part or the part of anybody else, or being a light that I was with.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it just all made perfect sense.
Hmm.
All part of natural order.
Nice. And did you, when you had that life review, were you able to feel, or did you see some sort of a rippling effect? Like you would do some negative action or positive action, and then you would not only feel it through your, where you were at the time, but you would feel it through the other person's eyes, and then down the line, like a kind of a ripple. Did you see anything
Yes,
like that?
yes,
Oh, you did.
exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of indicates that even the simplest things we do have profound implications. It literally affects every atom in the universe. If we had to help that little old lady across the street, she'll probably smile at someone that
Yeah.
day,
I
which
mean,
will then,
and even the smallest, kindest deeds, like you say, just like when you're in the checkout line at the grocery store and it's really busy, just to smile and say, hey, how's it going? Are you
mhm,
hanging in there? You're doing a great job.
yeah,
I'm always sure to, like when we go out to dinner, thank the waitress,
yeah,
even if they screw up, it's not
sure,
a big deal. They're doing the best they can. Everybody's doing the best they can. Even the
right,
people that seem that they're horrible or mean,
sure,
you don't know how they were raised.
that's right.
So there's like you get this big picture of everything,
Like
and it
broad,
doesn't matter how awful someone might be. I understand that, you know, God loves that person just as much as he loves me.
it's just so beautiful. I mean, the fact that you, yeah, you come back with a complete sense of awe and reverence for the snowflakes, like you were talking about merging, that sounds very beautiful. Of course, the downside of that is then the functioning in the 3D world could be somewhat put on the back burner, but I guess it's a process of integration then, isn't it? To
Yeah, it
integrate.
took me, I say for 3 years, afterwards, I felt like I was at a crossroads in my
Hmm.
life
Hmm.
and I didn't know what to do with this experience.
Sure.
I read everything, I just kind of became recluse, which I kind of was anyhow, but I became more recluse and I just, read every spiritual book and everything I could get my hands on. And I realized there's only one thing to do with this experience, is light and love, and
Mhm.
that was to give it away.
Beautiful.
You
Beautiful.
got to share it. You
Yeah.
gotta, and that was it's like a release,
Hmm.
released. It's the energy has to go somewhere. And
Hmm.
you keep it bottled up, it's uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
you're just there to, and that's why, we're here to serve God.
Beautiful. Serving God is literally serving everyone, serving ourselves because we love ourselves first and then we give from a full cup. A lot of people are giving from an empty cup, right? And then they're drained.
Mm-hmm.
Like give, 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 but they're not open to receive. It's just giving, which is kind of unbalanced, but it sounds like you've struck a nice balance through this whole thing, giving and receiving. And let's go into the fact that you had said that you were addicted to drugs and alcohol. Am I hearing you correct that you were delivered in a sense? Because you said that when you came back from the other side, you had this cocaine and this alcohol, but you're like, you know what? It's not even comparable to the bliss and ecstasy and joy that I found on the other side. So I can just easily give this up. Is that what I'm hearing? Were you able
I
to
did.
have no withdrawal symptoms? Were there any withdrawals?
There was.
Okay, okay, I'm just
Huge.
curious. Because
Well,
some people didn't have any and some do. I don't know.
well, yeah, I like to share this actually,
Sure.
because I will never judge an alcoholic. I
No.
know I tell people I had to die in order to quit drinking, and
Okay.
doing drugs. I did not think I was an alcoholic.
Okay.
To me, drinking was not a problem. It seemed to be a problem for everyone around me, but not
Okay.
me. The only problem I had was that there wasn't enough. So after that experience, it was like for the next 3 days to almost probably 5 or 6 days. Because I quit cold turkey. I had the DTs.
The
I
what?
went, I went into what's called the DTs.
Oh, okay, I'm not familiar with that.
I guess it's detox. It stands for detoxing or
Oh, okay.
something. I went into the shaking,
Oh, I see.
the the constant shaking, the freezing cold. I
Yeah.
had hallucinations.
Mm.
And I was in that for like 3 days, and it was like of intense 3 days. And then
Hmm.
probably still some of those effects for the next week or so.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just quit cold turkey. But what happened? I substituted a better drug.
Hmm.
I found out that just through meditation, and I had already been meditating twice a day before that happened.
Oh,
So when I meditated, I could just go back into the light, and I
okay.
could get back on that high.
Hmm.
So I became addicted to my new drug, which was God.
All right.
I basically substituted one drug for another. Only I guess this one was a little healthier,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to spend all my time with my new addiction, which was
All right.
being in nature and with God and prayer and meditation
Mm.
all day long.
Right. So you were
But
no longer embracing your humanness. You were going full into being that spiritual,
yeah,
which
I
is then
just,
another kind of out of balance.
yeah, it was. Um, but then I guess, over time in learning and
Mm.
and serving, I
Mm.
was able to get some balance
That's
and
good.
the help I needed.
Yeah. Super.
And one of the things I'd like to share this, I found that through my research, what I needed help was I needed a transpersonal psychologist to help me.
Hmm.
And I found a woman in my area, and I went to see her, and I was like, I can't even garden. I love to garden, but I can no longer garden because I can't rip out a weed because I can't kill it.
Oh.
So now I can no longer garden. What am I gonna do? And she just simply said to me, she goes, "Are you afraid to die?" I'm like, "No. In fact, I look forward to crossing it. I look forward to going back."
Hmm.
She said, what makes you think those weeds are afraid of dying? It's just the circle of life.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's like an epiphany. Oh, okay. So I went home and I started happily ripping out my weeds.
There you go.
But it was little things like that it was like you have to adjust to,
Right.
and like eating and things. So
Yeah.
just a
So
lot
it's
of
just
strange.
about, yeah. So it's all about reintegrating or integrating back and having a balance, right, between embracing your humanness and your spiritual self and seeing them as one instead of denying. Because I notice a lot of people tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They've had this wonderful spiritual experience and now, oh, denying the body, denying the human, they don't want anything to do with the physical body. But hey, there's a reason why we chose to have a physical body and have this human experience, right? It's so beautiful.
Exactly.
Um, but I
Exactly.
think people that resist, right? People that are in a state of resistance to this life are the ones that suffer. But once we stop resisting life, we can see the beauty in the darkness and the light because, without those polarities, we can't even have an experience. It's like,
Well, the one thing I like to mention to people is the richness of joy and even sadness
hmm,
in the human body, because when we're out of our body in the spirit or the metaphysical world,
hmm,
we do not experience joy in the same way,
hmm,
because when we are in our body, it's a whole body experience.
right.
So our joys are high. It
Feeling.
it's a million times, more it's stronger. It can, because if you felt on a physical level, and then our lows are solo.
Yeah.
We go solo.
Extremes.
But it's the richness of these experiences that make
Hmm.
life on earth and the human body so,
Yeah.
such an opportunity for spiritual growth, because we
Yeah.
do not experience these highs and lows in the same way,
Mm.
and even
Hmm.
just like gathering, like for me, gathering for a football game, and and your team win, you're with all your family and friends, and
Yeah.
I wrote a story in my latest book about the Buffalo Bills, and we're all happy about them, and they win a game and everyone's high-fiving.
Yeah.
It's just those experiences,
Yes.
you win an award, just the wonderful things that happen during life.
Yeah.
um
It's
but
great.
we do have the lows that go with it, but
Yeah.
when you are aware that there's more to life, that this is just like I don't like to say the illusion because people don't understand it, but
Right.
there's more to, there's different levels of reality.
Hmm.
It's easier to take the lows. It's easier to understand if somebody hurts you,
Yes.
or you're going through a difficult
Mm.
time. You
Mm.
have an illness, a hurricane took your home away. Okay.
Mm.
Um, People are going through this right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
but to put your trust and faith in God and know
Yeah.
that all this has purpose and meaning. And,
Yes.
don't put your, I tell people, don't put your trust and faith in the government or anybody else. Put it in God. You'll be disappointed every time. There's only one person.
Yes.
And know that, those experiences will make you stronger.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, would you say that the experience of joy on the other side is a non-feeling or beyond physical feeling? Because if it's non, because you were saying it's quite different. It doesn't have the
Yeah.
same richness or texture.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Hmm.
still bliss. It's still unconditional love.
But it's not a feeling. It's bliss is not a feeling, they say. It's beyond feeling. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, but because I was in the light and I experienced the incredible force of love.
Hmm.
But I think when we are in the body and experience love,
Mm.
it's just different. It's more rich. It's more
Hmm.
full body.
Hmm.
So, just another level, I guess, another a part of another dimension to our character.
Okay, so when people are describing, because you've had a near-death experience, and when I talk to other people, they describe this unconditional love like millions of times more than any love feeling we can have in our body. So what do you say to that? What's that all about? Are they describing something that you can't use words, of course, to describe, and it's definitely not a feeling. It's beyond feeling. It's
Well,
just
it's for me, love is a force.
a
It's a
force.
force like gravity.
Oh, okay.
And that's why, like when I said when I came back in my body, I knew the human body wasn't meant to take such a force
Mm,
because
hmm.
I felt this, it was a force.
Hmm.
So when we're in that light and love, it's like we're just in a whole nother dimension.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's just it is ineffable, but
Ineffable. Yes.
it's unconditional love.
Yeah.
It's the force that's in everything and connected with everything that makes, the world go around, as they say.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
So it
So
accepts it, unconditional love accepts everything, anything, everything. Because
yeah,
it is everything.
yeah, like it's like gravity. There's no judgment. It's
Yeah.
like, it's just there.
So where do you think
It's
this idea? Yeah, because in the church they talk a lot about a God that's judgmental, wrathful, jealous. These shall not have any other God before me, and sex is like worse than murder, according to the church. That's what I was raised with. That is like a terrible thing, and yet that's where we're all coming from. That's like kind of the main life force energy, but it's demonized so much unless you put it only within marriage. And I'm like, yeah, but what if you can't get married? It's like not everybody can get married. They're supposed to be celibate, I guess, apparently. I mean, it seems kind of silly, the whole thing. But I feel like all these rules and regulations are made by man from a place from a misalignment with their source. Not that they can ever be disconnected completely, but a corroded connection whereby they don't they're not in alignment, so they're coming from a place of separation. They feel they're separate. And of course, if you're separate, yeah, God would be a pretty scary thing
mhm,
because, oh, I'm separate from God. Now you have to earn the favor and curry favor with a higher power. And what you're saying is completely the opposite. You're saying, no, we're one with that power. That power isn't angry if you swear at it. It's like it can't be hurt because it doesn't have a big ego. It's
right,
like,
right.
how can God separate itself from itself? You'd have to, I guess, in order for, let's just pretend God is judgmental or all the things the church says. Let's pretend for a second that's true. If that's true, that means that God would have to separate itself from itself. And I think that's impossible in order to get the juice out of that, like, oh, I get to throw people into hell and burn them for eternity. How fun. This, I mean, basically, the source of life would have what need would it have? Like, what does it fulfill to throw people into the fire? It doesn't make sense because it would have to separate itself and have a huge ego. Then it could enjoy some perverted pleasure of such thing. So I think the whole thing with the church, I have respect for people in the church because that's what they've been taught and that's what they believe, right? Until they have an experience like yours where they like open their eyes. Whoa. Uh, it just seems like a lot of the teachings in the church are very illogical for me. Don't make any sense.
Well, you have people coming from third dimensional level.
Mm,
Yeah, and
mm,
I wrote in depth about this in my first book, Talking to God and Grandma. I have a chapter called Mystics, Mediums, and Muggles.
mm,
Muggles being, from Harry Potter, and I use it to
mhm,
refer to people that don't consciously use their psychic ability. And you could consider that the same thing as I look at the universe as three, very simplistically, as three dimensions, the physical, the metaphysical, and the mystical.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the teachings of Christ, it said all that I can do, you can do, even more so.
Yes.
You've got the mystical teachings of Christ being taught, at this, say, 10th dimension, because it's more than 5 dimension. And so you got 3-dimensional people, muggles, trying to teach about a mystical thinking.
Mm.
They can't understand it, and they're
Mm-hmm.
teaching it as best as they can, or regurgitating what someone else has told them.
Yeah.
And they come from someone that's separate. So, yeah, so you got people that are not awake, that are unconscious, trying to teach about enlightened ideas, trying to teach that we're all one without experiencing it or without
Yeah.
treating others in the same way. So,
Right.
yeah, I heard this quote recently on a podcast that it's hard to be enlightened or awake when most of the world is unconscious.
Right.
And I feel like, as far as religion, I didn't want to throw away my religion. I mean, I like
Yeah.
Christmas. I like Easter. There's some good
Yeah.
things about it,
There's some good things in it.
I
Yeah.
love the music. I listen to
Okay.
Christian radio music songs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but a lot of people end up just I feel like I outgrew my religion.
Mm.
I feel like I'm an expanded Catholic. It's like,
Sure.
take the Catholic parts out of me, they're always part of me,
Mm-hmm.
even in my name.
Mm-hmm.
So but I say there's a lot of, in religion, there's a lot of truth in religion,
Yeah.
along with a lot of BS. I think a lot of it's BS, but
Mm.
you can take whatever rings true for you,
That's true.
no matter what religion or what
Yeah.
spiritual teaching you take. You grab on to whatever rings true for you, and you hold on tight to that, and you live by it. And then the rest just goes by the wayside. So I think as we evolve, we're now, ascending from 3D to 5D.
Yes.
And a lot of people are already there. There's a lot of people
Yep.
that have had near-death experiences, that are doing the spiritual work, all the light workers. And the way I look at it, I think we're probably 80% there. But what
Beautiful.
gets put on the news? The 20%
Yeah.
of people, that are in, religion and politics and all the negative things in the world.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which was very difficult with me coming back, because when I first would watch TV or the news, when I came back, I would just cry. It would make me cry,
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I soon learned to just not watch TV or the news, but and then focus on all the good in the world. And there's a lot of good going on in the world.
Oh, so much.
And there's just, I mean, I
Yeah.
enjoy listening to tons and many podcasts like yours.
Thank
They
you.
just
Thank you.
bring light and love to people.
Yeah.
And you're a blessing to have this
Thank
show.
you.
And so many people like you, and there's a lot of good going on out there.
So much good. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't mean to throw any shade on, like, I have complete respect for those and love for those that are in those religions. I just see them as trying to organize something that can't really be organized, which is God. We can't put God in a box and say God is like this. And so, but I have complete respect for everybody's journey.
Yes,
And some
everyone
people
should.
need to be in religion, and
Yeah,
I respect that. Like, some
that's,
people need to
yeah.
be, evangelical or whatever. And that's at this particular leg of their evolution, right? So I
Mhm.
respect that, and I have nothing but love for those. And I need to send love to the system too, because it's helping us to wake up. It's a catalyst, right? So I got to send love to the religion as well. Even though I don't like the religion, I can have love for the religion. Um,
I do love religion. I love religion in general. I just love learning about, I love all the
okay.
traditions, the
Yeah.
music, the culture that goes with
Yeah.
all different types of religion. It's very rich, the music. Yeah.
Yeah. See, you're focusing on the positive aspect of it, and that's very good. That is beautiful. That is that. Yeah. Hey, we can have religion when we focus on just the parts that
Yeah,
resonate.
the things that uplift you, the
That
music.
uplift, that
Yeah.
that feel good, that uplift. Yeah, very good. So I don't know, it's been a real delight chatting with you. I think that your message is so beautiful, and you've got a book that you've put out. How can people, what's your books called? And I guess you did mention something before, but I know
Yeah.
you've got more than one book. What book would you like to show us today, and where can people get that?
Actually, I'm going to show you my show and tell first.
Do that, do that.
This was this was my life before my near-death experience. These are the medications that I was on. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, oh my God, so
I
many.
look at these and I say, no wonder I was sick. So
And
I
you're
went
only
from
40 then? Or how old were you then?
40, yeah.
And you're on
So
that many medications by age 40. Wow.
I went from taking medication to taking vitamins, supplements. And this was I went from being the beer babe, drinking beer mostly, to
Yeah.
now drinking water. So,
Beautiful.
and the book that I talked about that I wrote after my excommunication was it's called Talking to God and Grandma.
Okay, good. Talking to
Mystics
God and
Meeting
Grandma. This is the
and
one for cat
Dreams.
that's addressing Catholics.
It's a book that's for to teach anyone how to communicate with
Oh,
spirits, but it
no.
is geared for people of the Catholic faith.
Hmm.
Um, it's in three parts. It has my experience, part one. Part two is the educational part about
Hmm.
parapsychology, Christian theology. And
Hmm.
part three is step-by-step instructions on how to communicate with their loved ones, staying connected with loved ones on the other side.
Hmm.
And then that was actually republished and retitled last year.
Hmm.
And then this year, just a few weeks ago, not off the
Yep.
press, is my latest book called Breakfast with Bluebirds.
Congratulations. That's
Inspirational short stories. This does have, they're all, I call it my paranormal chicken soup for the soul.
okay. Yes.
With a shout out to Jack Canfield.
Jack Canfield, yes.
So they're all short stories,
Yeah.
all true stories, things in my life that happened to me. And
Hmm.
over many years, I would send newsletters out to people on my email list, and I would send inspirational short stories.
Hmm.
And so I decided one day to just put them all together and publish them. So I got stories. There's stories about angels and miracles, and there's even a story about aliens and UFOs and life lessons from bluebirds and fireflies and bears in nature. And so it's a, an inspirational, uplifting stories about life, death, life after death. And yeah, and it's to help people that are going through a difficult time. It's people that are
Nice.
struggling. And for people, there are two stories in there and dedications to the Buffalo Bills football team. So
Oh,
for
cool. There you go. Shout out to the Bills.
the Bills, or you can substitute, I think, your favorite football team, and it's all life lessons, it's like
Yeah.
life is like a football game, it's full of drop kicks and penalties
Yeah.
and injuries, but we have to just keep getting up over and over again to go head
Yeah.
first to that behemoth line and just hold on to our dreams, and
Yes.
so and the bluebirds come from my love of bluebirds,
Mm. Hmm.
and a lot of people mix up bluebirds with blue jays,
Right.
the smaller eastern bluebird. Um, I look forward to them coming every year. I have 11 nesting boxes on our property,
Hmm.
and I put like a little basket near their box where they settle into,
Hmm.
and I train them with a whistle to come to the basket when I put mealworms in there because they'll
Oh.
only eat live bait. So this goes on for several months when they first arrive in the spring. And every morning I'll go out and have my breakfast and coffee with the bluebirds. And I
Yeah.
meditate and pray, and I learn life lessons from the bluebirds. Like
Hmm.
they don't worry about how to build their nest or how to take care of their young. They just do what they have to do and go on with life. And
Yeah.
So I just enjoy having breakfast with bluebirds and nature and God. And that's one of my very short stories, one of my favorite. I think that one's only 2 pages long. So
Mhm.
so that's where the title of the book comes from. But after death communication stories,
Mhm.
about my mom came to visit me in a dream visit, and
Mhm.
stories about a cardinal. And so there's a lot of these stories about me growing up in a haunted house.
Mhm.
And he said stories about UFO. So
Yeah. See,
there's a lot in there. It's a very
yeah.
easy read, short stories.
Yeah.
Um, and they're both books are available on Amazon,
Hmm.
and they're both available in paperback and ebook. And hopefully soon the Breakfast of Bluebirds will be available on Audible. But be a couple
Oh,
months.
that'll be good because I like listening to books on Audible.
Yeah, it'll be a couple months, and it's actually
Yeah.
available on the ebook for people that have unlimited Kindle. It's free.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. And so your first book is about you said it was about communicating with spirits. You show people how to do it in a safe way, I guess. Is there a good and a bad way of communicating? I shouldn't say it that way. Is there like a,
Well, according to the church, the Catholic Church, for those people, it's practicing spiritualism, and
oh,
it's against the teachings of the church. But like I said, if you just use the church doctrine on the communion of saints, it's all a matter of semantics. It's what you call it.
semantics.
You can't practice spiritualism, but you can practice the communion of saints. So,
Isn't that interesting? So we just got to read between the lines on that one, is what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah. And no one can everything. I say it's the most comprehensive book ever written on the communion of saints ever.
Well,
So,
hey, if you're in a good vibration, if you're in a positive, high vibe state, you can only be a vibrational match to good spirits anyway, right? That's the way I read
right.
it.
And people and spirits come to communicate you all the time, and they give you signs.
Hmm.
And I was like, I didn't understand when I was told I couldn't communicate with loved ones on the other side. I'm like, well, you guys forgot to tell those people on the other side, because they're coming to communicate with me all the time. But evidently that's not against the church rules. You don't have any, you have no control over that.
Right, right. Well, I guess everything what's meant to happen happens in people's lives anyway, right? I agree with you. I don't believe in this idea. What appears random, there's this divine implicit order. Isn't that what you felt when you had your near-death experience? That
Oh
there
yeah.
really nothing is random, it just appears random, and
Everything's in perfect order.
it's all
Yeah.
working for our highest good anyway.
Hmm.
So if someone has a negative experience with the spirit, I guess, hey, that's for their growth too. But at least we know that if we stay in a high vibe state, we can have a beautiful communication with the other side.
Yeah, people said to me, oh, how do you know you're not communicating with evil spirits? I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't hang out with evil people. I don't hang
Yeah,
out with dark people.
same
You
thing.
only attract what you are,
What you are.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I don't hang out with criminals and drug addicts anymore. And
Right.
so I'm only gonna hang out with positive spirits. Those are
Yeah.
the ones that are gonna come to speak,
Oh,
communicate.
I love it. Thank you, Mary Grace. This has been really good. Now, if there's one thing before we go, though, oh, by the way, do you have a website where people can go as well?
Yes, I have a
Okay, we'll put
website.
that underneath as well. What's it
Yeah.
called?
It's www.giftsofgraceministry.org.
Very good. Giftsofgraceministry.org. So feel free, everybody, to check that out. If this resonates with you, and obviously, if you've made it this far in this podcast, it does resonate on some level
And I
with
do
you.
spiritual counsel. Yeah, I do spiritual counseling for anyone who has any questions. I can do Zoom.
Okay,
So
cool. Wonderful. Isn't it so nice the technology we have now that
yeah,
we can
it's
do these kinds
awesome.
of things? I mean, 40 years ago, it would have costed a fortune on a telephone, right?
Yeah.
Now it's pretty much free practically. So one last thing. If you could share just one last nugget of wisdom with the world, what would it be, Mary Grace?
Yeah, I think I've already mentioned it. It's
Okay.
just in all things, put your trust and faith in God, and just know whatever you're going through, whatever difficult situation you're going through right now, this too shall pass. You will get through this, and you'll get on the other side of it. and you'll be stronger for it, and you'll be better. And just know that God has you. He's got your back.
Mhm.
Just put your trust and faith in God and know that you will get through it.
Right. Believe in love over fear, right? Believe in the love.
Right. Right.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mary Grace.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. See you next time on the Soul Inspire podcast.
Thank you so much.
The Soul Inspire podcast is brought to you by DaleCross.net. Discover the freedom, bliss, and ecstasy within you. At DaleCross.net, I can help connect you with your soul's purpose, passion, and mission. Your soul signed up for something great. Discover what it is with the tools I offer. Book a free one-on-one consultation now at DaleCross.net and live your greatness.